Good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan Lenney, and I will be your worship associate for this morning's service. Welcome, and thank you all for joining us in this space. Here at Tapestry, we gather in solidarity together so that we might gain clarity about our beliefs and depth in our convictions. Some of you may have been members for decades, and for others, this may be your first time in a UU congregation. But whoever you are, we welcome you. This morning, we come here to practice loving our neighbors and loving our whole selves. This hour is an opportunity to reflect and open ourselves to encounter the sacred. Thank you for your patience as we are all learning this new way to be together in community. Please remember to keep your microphone muted throughout the service. However, if you'd like to turn your cameras on, we would all love to see your smiling faces. Our minister, the Reverend Kent Doss, is not preaching today. This Sunday, we will be hearing from Joey Moeller, Julia Miller, myself, and Max Uera as our guest speakers for Youth Sunday. Joey, Julia, and I are just becoming seniors in high school, and Max is graduating this year. This morning, we will be sharing our thoughts on the topic of good and evil. Now, I would encourage you all to shut off your cell phones or place them aside so you can truly make a worshipful space in your own home. But after the service, you might check in with Tapestry on your local social media platform and share this experience with your friends. Tapestry always has fun events for people of every age and interest. We are still active with several meetings on Zoom and social justice actions that you can take from home. One such activity is United Way's virtual United to End Homelessness Advocacy 101 class, taking place on June 22nd. Also next week is Tapestry's annual business meeting following the worship at 11:45. More information about these events and others is available in the order of service, the newsletter, or on our website. This month's topic is on good and evil. I think that while the concept of good and evil is hard for just about anyone to come to terms with, it's particularly challenging for us UUs. We don't have some great origin story about the original sin, and we don't get to relish in the comfort of knowing that a benevolent God is presiding over things somewhere. In fact, we aren't really taught any hope-inspiring truths, as we are challenged instead to find our own truth. I use that word challenged because finding our own truth is challenging. It's challenging to look out at a world filled with police brutality, racial discrimination, and even a pandemic, and find goodness amongst all that evil. Growing up as a UU, there were many times in my life when I wished I had some church doctrine to hang on to. Some sort of reassurance that everything would pan out okay in the end. But now, reflecting on the topic of good and evil and the teachings of our UU tradition, I believe that there are still places in our faith where we can find hope, places where we can summon a spark of goodness amidst all the hatred and strife. I believe that those transcendent feelings of hope and goodness can be found in nature, in love, and in the interconnectedness of all living things. It can be found in our morals, our meditations, or even our music. In trying times like these, where the evil in the world seems to drive out the good, it's important to remember that we can still find those sparks of hope. They are the lifelines that will get us through hard days like these, and they are what will keep us on our feet and fighting for a better tomorrow. This morning's Chalice Lighting comes from Betts Winnecke. May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage as we seek out what is good within and around us.
The chalice is a tremendous symbol of hope in our Unitarian Universalist tradition. Today, we will extinguish our chalice for a short while in recognition of the flame of life lost when Jean Rosenberg died this past week. Jean was a delightful woman that made fast friends with many in our Tapestry community. After extinguishing our chalice, we'll hold a short moment of silence in honor of her death, and then we will relight our chalice to honor the life of community and love that continues on. Let us relight our chalice in honor of Jean's laugh and joy and the community here that she so enjoyed. On Sunday, June 28th at 1 p.m., we'll hold a memorial service to celebrate Jean's life among us. I hope you'll be able to join us.
Now I invite you all to read our covenant and our words of affirmation along in your own homes, but because Zoom can only recognize one voice at a time, please keep your microphones muted.
Love is the spirit of this congregation, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another.
These opening words come to us from the Reverend Linda J. Haughty. Enter with me that still place within, the center, where we find not only our inmost selves, but also our connection to the farthest reaches of the universe. Here we confront our aspirations and our failings. Though we seek always for our lives to be full of goodness, we sometimes lack courage to right the injustices that confront us. Though we seek always to be generous, sometimes our fears cause us to be greedy. Though we seek always to walk the moral high ground, sometimes we judge others too quickly and too harshly. Though we seek always to understand the larger mysteries, sometimes doubt causes us to lose our faith in our purpose. Here, in this space made sacred by our shared lives and our shared yearnings, may we find new courage, new generosity of spirit, forgiveness given and received, and rededication to the higher purposes of our lives. Please remain muted and join in singing our opening hymn, number 346, Come Sing a Song with Me.
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you
Macca the Alpaca by Matt Cosgrove. This guy is called Macca. He's an alpaca. He loves splashing in puddles and gives the best cuddles. Macca's days were carefree, filled with giggles and glee. Until drama, a llama. That guy is called Harmer. He's no charmer. He's tall, strong, and woolly, but also bully. Harmer was mean, quite the worst you have seen. He took Macca's stuff and played very rough. You puny pipsqueak, I'm strong and you're weak. Macca said, no, you're wrong. I'm surprisingly strong. The pair made a bet and a challenge was set. I'll move this boulder. Harmer pushed with his shoulder. He huffed, puffed, and nudged till it finally budged. When Macca's turn came, he just used his brain. Humph. Well, why don't you try to reach up this high? Easily done, using this. Harmer let out a hiss. Now that llama was fuming, his nasty mind zooming. Okay, let's have a race. Try and keep pace. First to the top is the best, full stop. They took off in a flash and began their mad dash up the steep mountainside. But then the rocks started to slide. Being nimble and light, Macca made it all right. He leapt to the summit, he saw Harmer plummet. Some might call it karma, but that bully of a llama went crash, bang, and splat. And that, my friends, was that. Harmer said, plainly shaken, turns out I was mistaken, for you have proved it quite clearly, size doesn't matter, really. Macca went up to the thug and gave him a great, big hug. The end. I hope you enjoyed the story. I will see everyone next week.
A reading from the Dhammapada. Never does hatred cease by hating in return. Only through love can hatred come to an end. Victory breeds hatred. The conquered dwell in sorrow and resentment. They who give up all thought of victory or defeat may be calm and live happily at peace. Let us overcome violence by gentleness. Let us overcome evil by good. Let us overcome the miserly by liberality. Let us overcome the liar by truth.
It's hard to follow that with prayer and meditation, but I'll do my best. Will you join me for a short time of prayer or meditation? You can sit back, relax. Spirit of life, God of many names, mystery beyond naming, we gather in thanks for this good day. So much change has been thrust into our lives these past 3 months. Much of it is unimaginably bad. It will take a long time for our hearts and minds to come to terms with the death toll of COVID-19. And in the midst of pandemic, we have the reality of police violence that's been thrust before us in shocking ways. But even in the midst of hurt and chaos, other more positive changes are occurring. Hearts and minds are being opened to the reality of systemic injustice. Policies and laws around the country are slowly improving to ensure the safety of all people. And in this time of dis-ease, we're finding new ways to be together and new ways to care for one another. There's so much change in such a short time. And we find a moment of stillness, a moment of peace together, a moment to let go of some of the anxiety and tension. For this moment, connected in our separation, we are safe. And that is good. So let us take a couple of deep breaths together, in and out. Breathing in and breathing out. We settle now into a time of stillness to embrace the wisdom of shared silence. Namaste. Amen and blessed be.
It is impossible to ignore the injustice in the world. Walking outside, watching the news, listening to radio, or scrolling through social media, we constantly see both good and evil. We hear about the death toll of the coronavirus, and then we also hear about communities coming together to raise funds to buy supplies for hospital workers and singing songs of hope. We see the riots to end police brutality towards African Americans, and we also see all of the states coming together and uniting behind this cause to bring peace. Of course, the interpretation of these events is heavily based on our own perception and opinions. By having an open mind, we are able to see how good and evil intertwine with one another and are almost impossible to separate. The Taoist principle of yin and yang is one of the oldest philosophies on the interconnectedness of all things. The two halves of yin and yang both contrast with and complement each other. At its core, each half has a bit of the other. There is a constant, inseparable balance between the dark and the light. But this balance is not rigid, but rather moves with the ever-changing nature of life and the universe. Ancient Chinese philosophers have applied yin and yang to almost everything, and have even pointed out the principle in numbers, nature, and colors. The ideas involved with the yin and yang can easily be applied to good and evil. Without good, evil could not exist, and vice versa. They are impossible to separate and never appear apart. There can be good found in evil. We continually hear about one tragedy after another. The flood of negativity makes change seem hopeless. The death of George Floyd was a terrible loss that has shook the world. It is undeniable to acknowledge the pain that millions of people are feeling as they come together and speak for change. But there is some good that is coming from this. Light is being shed on a problem in a racist system as people come together to raise awareness for a cause they believe in. An international flame has been lit as protests in New York, New Zealand, Germany, England, and other countries around the world gather together over the death of George Floyd. The ideas of good and evil themselves are constantly changing and challenged over time, especially those that are socially and culturally accepted. While at one time in the United States, if a woman was to divorce her husband, she would be outcast from society and viewed as inferior. Now, divorce is much more culturally accepted. Most human rights issues have vastly changed ideas of good and evil. The collective knowledge of ethics as a society is evolving. Values are changing. Evil can be found within the good as well. Utilitarianism argues that actions are moral as long as they overall offer the best benefit possible. Even if someone has evil intentions, their actions can be good. For example, if someone donated lots of food to a homeless shelter, but only did it to stroke their own ego, their actions can be seen as the evil inside of the good. The utilitarian ideas may not be shared by everyone, but I think that they offer a unique perspective on the evil inside of the good. Actions and intentions are linked together, but can be very different when weighed as good or evil. By looking at current events, it is obvious that nothing is purely good or evil, black or white. People pick sides, and point of view has a major impact on how one sees an event. By asking the opinions of different people, you will find many different opinions. It is impossible to decide if one issue is purely good or evil, so instead, we must open our minds. Human rights issues have constantly pointed out hatred and suffering, but there can be good found in the bad. It is a slippery slope into hopelessness, but by paying attention, we can see both the good and the evil of the world.
Reverend Kent Doss likely regrets yielding this Sunday's service to the youth. This sermon is delivered in one of the most divisive moments in American history. White supremacy versus black lives, people versus the state. And we happened upon the theme of good and evil preceding it all. Now, as a younger person, I've gotten to know the social and technological aspects of America. Social media is a natural extension of my family, neighborhood, and school. It's so very convenient and expedient. The images of police brutality, online petitions, eloquently packaged rhetoric, and artworks by Keith Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat, they all pose minimal risk to be shared, reposted, and replicated. Now, in the meantime, I've also received many unsolicited commercials from brands that have purchased ad space on these sites. In June, what is usually advertised as Pride Month, companies are debating on whose rage is more marketable. Is it the LGBT communities with rainbow wrapping, or the Black communities represented by blotted out Black packaging? They found the answer. It's an algorithm. Google Ads, a service that tracks internet history, is able to, from this information, personalize what advertisements we watch before our regularly scheduled programming. Similarly, these sites deliver content they think we'd like. In other words, what we will watch until an advertisement is shown and a profit is made. The revolution will be televised, but it will be paid for by Trump for America and filled with adverts for Coca-Cola and Listerine. The revolution is allowed to be televised as it's diluted by profit and platitudes. It's filled with sellable, reproducible iconography, whether that be artworks of George Floyd or a counter in the form of a thin blue line flag. Both are available on Amazon and shared as Facebook icons. We're reaching a point where the ease of technology and the outsourcing of our information has made our political allegiances much more obvious, but so much more worthless. The peak irony of this conclusion is that I'm hesitant to use statistics from NBC and Forbes that report Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, profiting $34.6 billion, and Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, profiting $25 billion from the pandemic. And that's before the re-eruption of the Black Lives Matter movement, which has arguably sold more MAGA hats, more anti-fascist banners, and even more anti-Antifa merchandise through Amazon. Zuckerberg, similarly, gets more rich as we browse Facebook, Instagram, and many news outlets laced with advertisements. No one appreciated Bloomberg News advertising Bloomberg's way into the Democratic primaries, so neither should we become complicit in Bezos owning the Washington Post. Zoom, the very server we're on now, recently released a statement through CEO Eric Yuan. Free users of Zoom, aka those who can't pay, will not have their calls encrypted. In Yuan's words, free users, for sure. We don't want to give them encryption because we also want to work together with the FBI, with local law enforcement in case some people use Zoom for a bad purpose. The government protects large companies protect the government, and the police are there now, certainly not on the streets to protect small local businesses. No wonder everyone likes strawmen, sounds like strawmen nowadays. Reproducible, popular social movements can't stand without strong mission statements, leaders that double as mascots, and iconography that thrives on media platforms, news, and online fundraising. Super PACs, interest groups, and movements are run like companies because it's the only way they can vie with the likes of corporations. But in vying with them, they run the risk of falling to the same vices. But all this isn't to say that I fear the works of Sean King or the artworks of Shirin Damra, Keith Haring, and John Michael Basquiat floating around Instagram, or think they're evil. There are people and organizations and artists that are independent of the corporate machine. Granted, they're very hard to make out now in the chaos that exists. And as for the theme of good and evil, many of Jean-Michel Basquiat's works have recirculated online in the past few days, along with those of Banksy and Keith Haring. Basquiat's works, especially those that focus on the dichotomies of the rich versus the poor and poverty and power, they present a parallel to our themes at face value and in the irony of their auctioning. Like Che Guevara's steely-eyed look on t-shirts, there's an evil to tearing Basquiat's artwork from the walls of Lower Manhattan and putting it in the Broad. This is only exacerbated by the fact that the artwork is expensive, exclusive by the artist being dead from overdose and AIDS. In the contemporary art world, beauty may be in the eye of the beholder, but American justice shouldn't be. That is, in the eyes of those with power, the president, the police, and the prosperous. While Basquiat died from overdose, Haring from HIV/AIDS, and George Floyd by the police, there's a larger evil in our trust of the powers that are, a trust that leads to complacency and virtue signaling. We may be complicit through our lack of action, or through our actions lacking substance. What we've done, how we've reacted to events such as these in the past may not be enough. Maybe that's why they persist. I've only existed for about 2 decades, so in my lack of experience, I return to what I know is practical. Sometimes it's best to distance ourselves, if only a day, from the chaos. It is then we can return rested and ready. I, for one, have deleted all my social media apps to find time in which I can reevaluate my morals, ethics, and actions. I, also, have turned on ad block. Granted, this doesn't reduce the advertising problem. It merely hides it. It is an effective mean of protest, as what are advertisements without those who watch them. I'd also suggest for those protesting, leave your phones and ID at home. If not, still distance yourself from them as a means of sifting through the chaos and the many, many thoughts and opinions swirling through your head. Maybe then we'll know who and what we can trust. Thank you.
With the school year recently having ended for me, I've been thinking about how nice it is not to have that obligation anymore for the next few months. No more classes, homework, or seemingly endless hours of stress and anxiety. But even with all those things I wholeheartedly do not enjoy, I've realized how extremely important school is. It ensures that I have a good basis of knowledge and prepares me for real life. So on surface level and without much thought, I would have considered school an evil. But when I look at it in a broader sense, I see the immense good it does. And to me, this brought to light the impact perception has on how people view something as good or evil. Now, for many things, these different perceptions are mostly harmless, but sometimes they can be dangerous. The first example of this that comes to my mind are the recent protests and riots that are occurring. Some of my misinformed friends have been saying that these protesters are dangerous terrorists, because most of what the mainstream media is showing is just the destruction. And this leads them to resent the Black Lives Matter movement. But if they would have just done a little bit of research, they would have realized that the great majority of protests started out as very peaceful and were actually escalated by the police. The perception these people have on the protesters is dangerous because it leads them to confirm the racist stereotypes of Black people being thugs. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that everyone should be careful in the decisions they make about whether something is good or bad. Because if something that is not evil is deemed as such, demonization could easily take place. But this doesn't mean we shouldn't be able to categorize things as really bad, because there's still value in being able to do that. For example, the impact humans have had on the environment can be categorized as really bad. But the value in being able to do that is it gives people a reason to care about it and make change happen. This example also highlights the concept of silver linings, because not all bad things lead to more bad things. In fact, a lot of times, bad events lead to good things happening, because it seems that the worse something is, the more people will know and care about it. Although unfortunate, I believe evil will always be a part of society. And I know that that sometimes makes people feel uncomfortable or even hopeless at times. This doesn't mean we should just wallow in despair when evil does come around. I think we should look at it as a learning opportunity. We should use it as a precedent for what ought not to happen again. But I do know it can be difficult to deal with evils, and I believe that for most things there is no easy solution. But this is just a part of being human, and we have to accept that. Thank you.
I didn't really know what I thought of the relationship between good and evil until a few weeks ago, when Reverend Kent shared with us the story of a farmer who lost his horse. For those of you who weren't there for that story or who don't remember, I'll give a quick recap. The story tells of a farmer who goes through various ups and downs in his life. His horse runs away, but then it comes back with another. His son breaks his leg, but as a result, his son is exempt from the war. Everything which seems to be good and evil in this farmer's life often ends up being just the opposite. This doesn't matter much to him, however, as he takes these blessings and accidents somewhat passively. He still grieves over his son's leg, and he still goes out to look for that missing horse. But unlike his seemingly short-sighted neighbor, he doesn't stake his emotion on that which he can't control. And that's because the farmer understands that the events playing out around us are on far too big a scale for any one person to comprehend. I think that's a fact many of us fail to remember in our day-to-day lives. People like to say in a comforting sort of way that it's always darkest before the dawn. But they say this as if darkness was an evil that we simply have to persevere through in order to get to some goodness present at dawn. Why don't we say instead, only when it's darkest can you see the stars? I think that we all have a tendency to take unfortunate occasions as holding nothing but bad news. Darkness is darkness, and the best we can do is close our eyes and hope for the light to come out again. But why not make the most out of the darkness? Why not look for the stars, the moon, the peace, and the quiet that comes with those darkest nights? People say that the grass is always greener on the other side, but why not take our shriveled up, splotchy, rabbit-eaten grass as an opportunity to install some drought-resistant plants that will help our environment? They say that there's a calm after every storm, but I think that there can be a beautiful calm during the storm, as it breeds a perfect atmosphere for curling up by the fireplace with a good book, or an excuse to slow down and play a board game inside with your family. Every cloud has a silver lining, to be sure, but why limit ourselves to just the lining? Why not lay back in our perfectly patchy grass and see what wonders can be seen in the clouds themselves? Throughout the last few months, I've been on somewhat of a roller coaster of ups and downs, similar to that of the farmers. When school was first canceled, I saw my plans with friends, my prom, my summer road trip, all go up in flames. But then I realized that not having to wake up at 5:45 every morning for zero-period calculus meant I could head down to the beach and finally have the time to hone in on my surfing skills. On my very first trip to the beach, I safely parked in a neighborhood a mile away from any crowds and rode my skateboard down to start my summer off with a perfect day of surfing. The sun was shining, the wind was blowing just enough to keep me from getting too hot. As I soon found out, it was also blowing just enough to catch the side of my surfboard like a sail and send me tumbling off the back of my skateboard onto the concrete. I broke my kneecap, tore my meniscus, and another ligament in my knee, and I had to hobble down the street to find someone with a phone to call for a ride. Now, bedridden, I found myself inclined to mourn the loss of my surfing abilities for what I knew would probably come to be the end of the summer. My injury seemed like nothing but an evil. But then I looked over and saw the stack of books sitting on my bedside table, nearly 24 high, that I've hardly had any time to chip away at. And since then, I've spent nearly every day outside with a coffee and a good book, and I'm not too bitter about the loss of a summer filled with surfing. The point of my story, and that of the farmers, is that everything isn't black and white. When something seems to be evil, chances are there's still potential for good to come about. And when something seems to be a blessing, more times than not, a wrench will be thrown in the gears, or a knee will be thrown out. The answer then isn't to cross our arms, close our eyes, and accept neither good or bad things in our life. Just as the farmer still went out to look for his horse, still mourned the loss of his son's leg, and just as I will go through months of physical therapy with the hope that I might surf again in the fall, to take things with a grain of salt isn't to give up. In fact, it's just the opposite. Instead of reeling in the face of evils and lavishing in the presence of good, we all need to keep moving forward, to keep finding things that make us happy and fulfilled. When God closes a door, he, she, they, or the web of all things that connects us opens a window. In the face of tragedy, sadness, sorrow, and disappointment, I encourage you all to never stop looking for that window.
Generosity is a core value that we aim to develop at Tapestry. Generosity of spirit, generosity of time, and generosity of money help us remind us of the abundance of our own lives. And of course, generosity also helps to care for the world around us. This month, half of the money received through our worship services will go to immigration equality. They provide legal support for LGBT people seeking asylum or trying to immigrate into the United States. In the chat box, you can find the link to give online or the phone number to give via text. In the spirit of Tapestry making a difference in our world, the offering will now be received.
We extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth.
The warmth of community.
For the fire of commitment.
These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our closing words come from the Reverend Dr. Linda Anderson. Sometimes we do what is wrong. We feel out of control and helpless. We feel ashamed. Yet, evil is not all we are. Sometimes we do what is right. We feel proud and courageous. We feel our strength. Yet, good is not all we are. Like the wind, sometimes mild, sometimes fierce. We hold all the moods and the power inside us. We bring the soft rain and the wild storm. It is our nature to contain it all. May we have peace with who we are and with who we may be. May we have peace with who we have been, evil and good, foolish, wise, weak, and strong. May we know all that we are, and may we have peace.